and welcome to CIBER Focus, your source for international business information. Today I'm joined by Professor Dan Lee, Associate Professor of International Business here at the Kelley School of Business. Professor Lee, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Nick.
So I want to start off talking about China and FDI. Now normally when people talk about FDI in China, they're talking about American firms investing in China, but recently I know that Chinese FDI in other countries has increased. Can you talk a little bit about the change that has caused this increase in the Chinese FDI?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The change, this is a very recent phenomenon. If you look at the FDI increase, the FDI from China, not the FDI inflow into China, the outward FDI has been increasing very rapidly. The average growth rate over the past 10 years is close to 50%. That's very significant. That has attracted a lot of attention from the rest of the world. So in terms of the external environment, there are several changes specifically for Chinese investment overseas. One significant change is, of course, the policy change. Before 2000, there's virtually no FDI. I mean, there's a little bit here and there, but very small volume. And also the foreign direct investment before 2000 is what was mainly taking place in the form of foreign aid. So not true foreign direct investment, the market kind of sense that we understand FDI. So since 2000, when the former premier Zhu Rongji, when he delivered his report to the National People's Congress on the work of the government, he was talking about go global. 走出去, that's the word used in the policy. So after that, after 2000, we started to see the very rapid increase of foreign direct investment from China. Now that's the policy change. We know in China, without the policy support, you cannot do anything. So once it's possible for companies to pursue this type of market activity, we start to see rapid growth. Now, in addition to the policy change, we also see something else very interesting. One is about the appreciation of the Chinese currency, the yuan. So if you think about the cost of doing business in different countries, when you play in the international market, foreign currency apparently plays a big role in terms of the production cost, in terms of the distribution cost. So when Chinese yuan started to appreciate in 2005, this currency benefit disappeared. Okay, that kind of benefit disappeared for manufacturing in China and then export to other countries. So that means, when Chinese currency is more expensive, the manufacturing cost for Chinese businesses also goes up. So that kind of incentive disappeared, and Chinese firms started to look at opportunities to manufacture in the rest of the world, rather than simply keeping everything in China, within the national boundary. Another very, very interesting external change is about, again, about policy, but not specifically on foreign direct investment. This policy change is on the tax return. Since 1979, since the open door policy, China has been implementing a export promotion-oriented policy. So when your company exports, you get tax return. But that policy was revised, was pretty much reduced dramatically, and at the very end just dropped completely. So there's one fewer incentive for Chinese companies to stay in China. But now they look at international market, look at resources in other countries, including policy benefits in other countries, to allow them to operate more competitively in the global market. So in terms of external changes, these are the main factors contributing to the very rapid increase of Chinese FDI.
Now, is there any particular goal that these companies are looking to accomplish when they start investing abroad?
Well, if you think about the media reports on Chinese FDI, we have seen more debates and also criticisms on Chinese FDI in the natural resource arena. That is a very important part of Chinese foreign direct investment. But in terms of whether Chinese companies have any particular goal when they go abroad, well, I think that depends on what kind of Chinese companies we're talking about. If you look at the composition of Chinese companies moving abroad, of course we have the state-owned enterprises, and this is the group that has attracted most of the attention from the media, from non-Chinese governments, from business world. But in terms of volume, yes, that's the big player, the biggest players in Chinese foreign direct investment. But if we look at the number, the sheer number of Chinese firms moving abroad, we see the majority Chinese firms moving abroad are actually small, medium-sized companies. So we have this very unbalanced picture in terms of what kind of companies we're talking about. So in terms of their particular goals, for state-owned enterprises, yes, government sometimes could play a role in terms of where they're going to invest and what kind of sectors they're going to invest in. But generally speaking, if you look at the population of Chinese multinational firms, we see a very diversified motivations to move abroad. And actually, this type of market-driven, this kind of economy-driven kind of behavior are very similar to multinational firms from other countries. So generally speaking, there are three categories that companies move abroad. One is to look for new markets. All right, well, we see this with European companies particularly because of the very limited size of their domestic markets. They have to move abroad. Now, for China, I mean, you could think of China as a very large country, very large market with billions of people. But the problem is something that many people are not aware of is the internal trade barrier. We always talk about trade protectionism. This is a inter-country issue, but in China we have this problem, this inter-province trade protectionism. So it's very difficult for one brand, from a specific province to break into another province. So although we have a large country, a large market, but for companies to maneuver within that country actually is very challenging. So in terms of market seeking, that's one reason for Chinese companies to move abroad. And also, if you think about Chinese firms, people typically associate that with Chinese brand names, for example. People typically associate that with low quality. Okay, so pursuing a brand, for example, one example would be Lenovo's acquisition of IBM's PC business. So the strategic assets, reputation, technology, brand names, distribution channels. So these are the resources that Chinese companies do not have, and they try to acquire that through their international expansion. The other one is about efficiency. Now, when we talk about companies, they could be working on different parts along their value chain. Now, if you think about Nike, if you think about Apple's iPhone, well, Chinese manufacturers, many of them are made in China. Chinese manufacturers only return like $6-10 out of the $60 pair of Nike shoes or Apple's iPhone. No one wants to be stuck at that stage. I mean, no company wants to be stuck at that very low value added stage. No country would want to be stuck at that stage. So to expand the activities that Chinese companies could potentially do to capture more value along the value chain, Chinese companies also move abroad. And we've seen Haier, for example, moving to the U.S. If you visit American College campus, you probably can see many small refrigerators made by Haier and used in students' dormitories. So generally speaking, I think overall, Chinese companies, Chinese multinationals as a population have very diverse goals to pursue their international business.
Now, is there any particular area they seem to be concentrating this investment?
You mean geographic area?
Right, right.
This is another very interesting point because we see more reports on Chinese investment in Africa. Chinese investment in Africa has been a long time. Even before 2000, the Go Global policy was put in place. Before that, a lot of foreign aid was directed towards Africa. But if you look at the actual foreign direct investment, over 70% of the investment took place in Asian countries, followed by Latin America, and then Europe, and then Africa. Now, in terms of, since we're in the States, in terms of North America, it's actually at a very low level right now. If you look at the percentage of foreign direct investment received by this country, Chinese investment is actually less than 1% of the investment received by the U.S. So that's a very interesting phenomenon, given what we have been hearing through the media, whether China is buying up the whole world, is buying up America.
Well, you actually bring up an interesting point about the media's perception of China. I know that in some sectors in the United States, there's kind of a fear of China's increasing economic power. Do you see any concerns to the United States, the fact that Chinese companies are increasingly going global?
Well, apparently, national security, national sovereignty, autonomy, I mean, that's the main concern about whether Chinese companies, particularly state-owned enterprises, whether they are directed to invest in the U.S. for purposes other than market, other than economic concerns. And we have seen some investment projects were rejected because of that kind of concern. Now, one example is the 2005 CNOOC's attempt to acquire Unicorn. That deal was rejected by CFIUS, that's the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. The reason cited was to protect national security. However, even with that specific deal, a lot of debate on whether national security can be a concern, cited for that specific deal, given the size of the American company that the Chinese firm was trying to acquire, or whether this is a political barrier rather than a market barrier. Now, about the Committee on Foreign Direct Investment in the U.S., a lot of criticisms about whether the committee has been transparent in terms of how projects are evaluated and how the reviews were conducted. Now, in terms of, for example, communication with the applicant, how long it takes for the applicant to receive a result, what specific procedures followed by the committee. Now, these are not very clear. Yes, national security is definitely a very legitimate concern, but given the lack of transparency used by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., there has been a lot of debate on this, a lot of complaints on this, and last year there is even a lawsuit. A Chinese developer sued the committee for the lack of transparency. Apparently, that deal was blocked. That's a wind farm deal blocked by the committee. Now, in addition to the national security concern, there is also the concern about whether competition would be fair, whether Chinese companies are subsidized by the government. I mean, that will bring some unfairness to the competitive landscape to the U.S. So these are the major concerns about Chinese investment in this country. The other one is about balance of payment. Now, when you think about foreign direct investment, that's one way to reduce trade deficit. Already, you do not have to buy from overseas anymore because they're manufacturing here. they're doing everything here. You can just buy locally. But if the company investing in the U.S., you know, imports a lot of the materials, from its home country or from the third country, the benefit of balance of payment may not be realized. So these are the concerns about foreign direct investment. Now, with China specifically, it's not very clear about whether there's more political concerns versus market concerns versus national security concerns. But these concerns are general to other investors as well.
Now, so those are some of the concerns that the United States has. Do you see possible benefits for?
A lot of benefits. A lot of benefits. If you look at the U.S.-China diplomatic relationship since 1978, the economic collaboration between these two countries has been moving forward. No matter, we have ups and downs, and particularly during the presidential campaigns, we hear all kinds of criticisms. But if you look at the overall pattern, of these two countries' cooperation, it has never, looked back. It's always, moving forward. Chinese foreign direct investment can bring the same benefits to this country. Now, this is capital inflow. It's always good to get more money.
Right.
Associated with the capital inflow is the job opportunities. All right, particularly given the economic situation that we have today. The Japanese investment in the 80s, that created the same concerns. At that time, people were saying, actually, some Wall Street Journal articles even use the title, Japanese are coming. Today we see Chinese are coming. Okay, but if you look at the employment opportunities created by Japanese investment, all right, we have over 700,000 jobs created by Japanese investment. Now, Chinese investment is not there yet because it's still at the very early stage, but that's a tremendous benefit for the whole economy. And also, if you think about the example that I just shared with you, CNOOC's attempt to acquire this oil company, for stockholders, well, the Chinese company was willing to pay a premium, but of course that deal was rejected. But that's another benefit that our stockholders could get. For customers, of course, we have more choices, more diversity. It's always a good thing. A very unique benefit, I think, associated with Chinese foreign direct investment in the U.S. is about learning about Chinese business. Okay, not everyone has the opportunity to go to China to try the water there, but this provides opportunity to interact with Chinese business community, to learn about the way that they do business. Of course, one goal for them to be here is to learn about the international market, to learn how we manage companies. But at the same time, this is opportunity for learning for both sides.
So going forward, do you think that Chinese global investment is going to continue to increase in the way we've seen it in the past couple of years?
Yeah, for the past years, we've seen Chinese foreign direct investment growing very rapidly. It probably will not be able to sustain this close to 50% increase, but the overall pattern will continue. I believe it will continue given the policy in China and also the need for Chinese investment in the global economy. Now, China just elected the new chairman for the country and also the new prime minister. The new prime minister, Li Keqiang, in his press conference, he was talking about the continuous economic reform and, of course, political reform. But we know that part has been going very, very slowly. But in terms of economic reform, the direction would be the same. So unless there's any significant political events, I believe the Chinese foreign direct investment will continue at a very high speed to Asian countries and also to here, the United States.
Professor Li, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Nick.
That's all for this edition of CIBER Focus. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, please contact us at ciber@indiana.edu.